I'm very lucky, and I absolutely never, ever lose sight of that. If, touch wood, I don't, but if I were to drop dead overnight, I've had a great time.
I think you'll like, or at least I hope you'll like, the straightforward, tell it like it is, there's no way to do it otherwise, conversational style of my guest, Tim Clinch, today, who you've just heard. Or is it whom? I'm living out the horrors of English exams through my son vicariously at the moment. He's just finishing up his GCSE school exams. I see him off at the door each day. I wish him luck, but he doesn't want any fuss. Don't fuss me, Dad. But honestly, I'm a quivering wreck in the corner as I shut the door. Anyway, my guest today, Tim Clinch, threw a proper googly at me right at the start of my chat. And if you don't know what a googly is, I'll leave a link and it'll make more sense. But yeah, a proper googly. It pretty much sent me into a bit of a tailspin right at the start of the interview, which I'll come to in a moment. I do hope you've enjoyed the walking in person interviews of late. I did one last week with my guest John Angerson. And it was Angerson, not Anderson. We were foiled by the spell checker changing stuff in the background last week. It was like a first edition, worth twice as much because of the typo, but it was soon corrected. Sir Michael of Mixonville was straight on the case after that show. Hello, Neil. Hope you're well. I've really been enjoying the recent episodes, especially when you're on location with your guests, i.e. Giles and John Angerson. I vote for more of those, please. Well, in that case then, Michael, could you just crack on with inventing and sending me the Star Trek-style teleporter that I've asked for, so I can personally visit photographers around the world, because I've been checking the doorstep of late, and there's nothing. It's still not arrived. One job, Michael, one job. I've been asking for months now, and look at that, absolutely fresh air at the door. Unless what's happening is that these packages you're sending, Michael, they've been nicked from my front yard because it's left in clear sight, just like a couple of those deliveries Jeff Bezos has made in the past. Jeff's let me down personally twice now, with packages in plain sight, both disappeared. And when I went to complain that the delivery wasn't quite up to the usual standard, he had the cheek to tell me they were handed to me at the door. Anyway, I'll leave it with you, Michael. If you could have it here, on my desk, a week Friday, that would be perfect. Consider it homework. But I tell you what, I'd have loved to have been making a walk in person with this week's guest, Tim Clinch. Tim now lives in Bulgaria. I wasn't quite expecting a lot of the things that Tim said, and his story of why he lives in Bulgaria is certainly an example of that, along with his thoughts about iPhone photography. He's worked as a professional photographer for many years, travelled the world, so he has, doing it. He's a fully signed up member of the Brethren who believe, like I do, that your camera is a passport to the world, a passport to curiosity for sure. It's the skeleton key to almost every figurative door of experience, I think, on this planet. He's renowned, absolutely renowned, for his super earthy, honest pictures of food. But whatever you do, don't call him a food photographer, as I found out.
Today on the Photo Walk.
What's food photography? A fairy cake on a plate. That's food photography, right? I passionately believe that anybody who thinks they're a half-decent photographer should be able to take a decent picture of anything. Because unless we get out, I feel very strongly that unless we get out of our comfort zones, you won't get anywhere. And the great thing about iPhones is if you want them to, they can make you disappear. A lighting cameraman who was an alcoholic and a scriptwriter who was a failure, and they got together and made this film, and they were given complete free rein. And they said to him, what gave you the confidence to make what is arguably the greatest movie ever made? And he said,
That's Tim Clinch, who is my studio guest on the show today. I'll take a peek into the mailbag in a moment for a flavour of today's letters into the show. But before that, thank you to our Extra Milers and MPB who sponsor this show. I have been looking at a new-to-me camera,
Because remember, MPB is the home of quality used photo and video gear. Cue glint in eye sound effect for the cameras. But in India, on our adventure next year, I will need to devise an ingenious clear bag system to go around my existing camera and lens during the Holi festival, where 1,000 colourful powders beautifully flying through the air can hit the bag, but not gum up the camera or lens. This is a big life experience, and I don't want to miss a moment. But also, I want to take something for this lifetime trip that I can just use during those moments. I don't want to mess around with things like bag contraptions. Something that's not necessarily throwaway, because that's not the ethos of buying used and buying soundly for the planet. But a point and shoot that I can freely use when I feel slightly more confident that the colour's not going to get me, but not shrivel into a ball and get despondent if I'm caught by a wonderful wave of red, blues and greens. So suggestions, please, although I have a few favourites that I'm taking note of on MPB's website. MPB.com is a website where you can safely buy and sell and trade quality used photo and video gear online, and you become a part of the circular economy. Go online to mpb.com, click the button at the top of the website that says Start Selling and Trading, and just follow the very easy instructions where you're prompted to enter the model name and click a box for the appropriate condition. From there, if you're selling or trading, your kit's collected from your front door, and then MPB, well, they pay you for your camera gear within days. Go to mpb.com. I'll have a link on the show page today, or simply remember those three letters, MPB, and shove on .com at the end, if you pardon the expression. On the show today then, our friends Phil and Cathy are on the road. They've been to London to blast off into orbit. Well, actually they went by train. The story of an unloved football scarf, the poem about riding life's train that's a real truism. We'll do a shutter sync, reveal the winner of last month's assignment, plus remind you of the current one. An Extra Miler Mike Venable reveals his own why of photography. Plus, at the end of the show, a freak weather event. Right at the end. The very, 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 very end. Right, shall we walk? Checklist out. Coffee, check. Garibaldi's, check. Walking boots, oh yes. SD cards or a spare roll of film, check. And a suit of armour for that weather event at the end of the show that's got me looking into the sky and wondering what actually is happening up there in the clouds. Let's walk.
You've been fantastic with your letters of late. I've got postcards to read, poems they're now starting to come in. There's a brilliant piece by Samantha Ramsey called Walking, which is either going to be a short film or a photo essay on our website, or perhaps even both. There are personal stories from you and. So please keep sending them in to stories@photowalk.show. Anything at all about what walking of photography means to you. And I know we have some listeners who really walk more than they take and make pictures. So since photo walk is officially 2 words, and I do battle with a spell checker on that one as well, despite trying to train it otherwise. Whether you walk, photograph or do both, I would love to hear from you. Right, where do we start this week with the mailbag? I think Phil and Cathy, that's where we'll start. They're on the road again, or rails actually this time. I think Phil, with his wandering thoughts as he walks with his camera, I think Phil is fast turning into one of our diarists, I do. Hi Neil. Aside from the podcast this week, I've been thinking of you, not in a romantic way, you'll be pleased to hear, but in as much as waving from a window. We, that's Cathy and I, came up from Cornwall by train on a new route for us. Call it an experiment. Normally it's just a case of jumping on a train in Cornwall and sailing up to Reading in one hop and then onwards toward London. But this one went via Newbury. For my other listener, who doesn't register this stuff, Newbury in England land is, well, pretty much where I live. It's in the lower middle part of England, whilst Cathy and Phil, They're in the lower west part of England land, out in, surfboard land actually, rolling hills, surfboards, and their own flag, and a real appetite for independence. Anyway, says Phil, we passed Newbury at 8:19 on the dot on Friday, and I waved. Phil, I think I saw you from the towpath. Friday's often my day of walking on the towpath by the canal, right next to the railway line. I wondered who that Herbert was, waving a damp copy of the Photography Monthly magazine. I thought, who is that strange character? And how is he able to lean out of a hermetically sealed carriage? Oh, I miss those days, Phil, of leaning out of train windows, getting midges in your eyes. For any children listening, by the way, don't lean out of train windows. I'm especially trained to be stupid. When we reached London, says Phil, we went to the Apollo mission audio-visual show, written and narrated by none other than Tom Hanks. I can't think of anybody else I'd rather have narrate that show, Phil. Definitely got to be Tom, hasn't it? These are photographs from the Apollo missions that have been remastered by Andy Saunders. ApolloRemastered.com. I tell you what, I'll leave a link on the show page, because nobody can ever spell Apollo. I know you can, but my other listener, hopeless. It was projected onto walls 2 stories high. Now, Andy Saunders would make a very interesting guest, Neil. He would, and I've contacted him, or rather I've sent an email. He hasn't yet contacted me. Who knows? He might be on the other side of the moon, the dark side of the moon. Cue the song. The show was excellent, but then I've been a big fan of Apollo since watching the first moon landing, aged 6, and then meeting Jim Lovell, the commander of the ill-fated Apollo 13 when he came to Cornwall in the 1980s. Did he come to Cornwall on purpose? Or was it an ill-fated mission where he was supposed to land in Houston or something? Oh, I'm in Cornwall. What are all these people doing surfing? Where am I? But yes, you read my mind when it came to contacting Andy. I have, as I say, reached out, and of course this is the second time in as many weeks that we've talked about space programs, or remastering them in this case. I am absolutely still, I've been thinking about it quite a lot, fascinated by the man whose job we mentioned last week, didn't we? The man whose job it was for years to strap the astronauts into their seats. The last human face they see before they blast off. It's the most fascinating job ever. I'd love to make and host a podcast where I talk to people who have the strangest and most incredibly thought-provoking jobs like that. But Michael of Mixonville, he's going to not only need to make a teleporter, he might need to invent another 7 days in the standard week. Anyway, says Phil once more, on our way to the gallery from Waterloo, we nipped down to the toilet. Not sure I need every single detail of your journey to London. And I tell you this, as in the corridor outside the toilet entrance were a row of display boards featuring photographs from the Landscape Photographer of the Year competition. An unexpected treat in a totally unexpected place. And talking of the unexpected, on the way home, I discovered a secret, not so secret, passageway while heading back into King's Cross Station that I've stored for a future visit. Anyway, I'll include a snapshot with a couple from the Lights Room Gallery for Apollo where they encouraged photography, which I assumed to mean they wanted to get it onto social media. But thank you for your pictures. And a secret, not so secret passageway in King's Cross. It couldn't possibly be, because I am getting this right, I hope, a Harry Potter-esque secret, not so secret passageway, because that is, King's Cross is where the Hogwarts Express goes from. I'm absolutely sure. So perhaps you've hit on a wizard-like passageway, Phil. You never know. Is there a gap? Does it, if you walk through the gap or you walk at the wall, does it take you into Diagon Alley? You've recently asked for our thoughts on social media for an upcoming special. And Phil says, I'd like to kick things off with highlighting my favourite social media outlet these days, and that is, and I think I'll share this with you, Phil, because it's mine too, YouTube. It seems to have taken over both in my viewing as an advanced form of blogging today and a reference tool. Catch you later, Phil. And Phil, that is a timely reminder, he says, as he huffs and puffs, walking up this hill. Note to self, pause the recording, walk up the hill and carry on. Phil, Cathy, hold on a moment, I need to grab my breath. I haven't made a reference picture yet today, have I? Or a sketchbooker. I should do that. That's a good way to catch breath. Pups, hold on a mo. I need to make a picture. He's very good. He's been very silent today. Has to bark a lot. Right. It's not doing much in the sky today. I'm in woodland for this moment anyway. Shutter speed. Here we go. 1 2 5th. F4. And here we go. Just a picture of woodland. Oh, let's grab another one. Not quite sure I like the composition on that one. The greens are a bit dull, I'm afraid. I'm doing my best, Phil. I'm doing my best. Pick your notes up and your letters. Yeah, some ideas for some, well, it's a blank canvas, really, for your thoughts on social media, because that's the special that we're doing in a couple of weeks time now, yeah. Toward the end of the month. Oh, almost July already. Yes, social media, some ideas, a blank canvas, really, this one. So you could answer questions or send thoughts in about how you use social media, what some of the biggest benefits from having social media is to share your work, professional or hobbyist, or any in between. Come, pups, we're going this way. There's no point looking at me like that. We're walking this way. You're going the other way, are you? I'll see you a bit further down the trek, shall I? He's getting braver, you know. How you handle the pressure of constantly creating content for social media. The challenges, negative or positive, because I don't want this just to be a negative chat about social media. There's much to talk about positively with this. Can you share a memorable story, perhaps, or experience that happened because of social media or your presence on a platform? So I realise some questions there might be more relevant than others. And as I say, it's a blank canvas, so you'll have many other things that you want to talk about in terms of social media. But the special is on the 28th of June, the last Friday of June. Some of our friends will be on that show, like Sean Tucker, to talk about it. So if you could send in your thoughts to stories@photowalk.show, stories@photowalk.show, I'd be very grateful. We've got some wonderful guests coming up. Black Crag, aka Glenn, who's known for his incredibly personable YouTube films featuring many photographic adventures made in the Lake District of the UK, but also places like, going to Base Camp Everest. There's Jim Richardson, who you'll hear mentioned today. He's been described as, let me get my apostrophes in the right place here, National Geographic's photographer's photographer. There should be two in there, shouldn't there? I'm sure. And Jackie Matachuk, who's the winner of the World Photographic Cup, Best of Nation for Canada. Her wildlife photography is just stunning. Some great stories coming up with Jackie as well. Right, ahead of my part one of the conversation today with Tim Clinch, here's a letter from Scott Glasgow, which came in a month or two ago now. For those that notice a footballing reference in the street photography part of the piece and think, hang on, football season, it's done now, isn't it? Before I read it, I was talking about the subject of mental illness and mental health with a forthcoming guest when we were having a preamble the other day on the phone, and he mentioned something that I thought was interesting. We were chatting about mental health and photography being a conduit to catharsism, and he mentioned, or rather hoped, that his mother wouldn't get the wrong idea listening to our chat on the show about, the subject of mental health and mental illness. And although it was a sort of an aside, and not necessarily anything too deep as we were chatting, we did both get to talking about the distinction between the two, mental illness and mental health, and how, and perhaps it's generational actually, in this country at least, that the words mental and health still have some folk thinking about the subject in a very negative sense or negative direction. I'm in no way an expert in this field, though your surprising letters of vulnerability and honesty have certainly been one of the best teachers I could possibly hope to have in a field that's very complex, particularly when it comes to language and the nuance of language. So this letter from Scott Glasgow seems very timely, actually, along with a reminder of an amazing photo project that he's working on. Hi, Neil. I've not actually written in of late with pictures. The problem is I spend so much time in front of a screen at work, I can't bring myself to edit images, let alone write. I know how you're feeling sometimes. The self-care and benefits to mental health and well-being are one of the topics you often talk about. And working in mental health services, I thank you and your other listener for the openness you do display when you're discussing the topic. More than this, the show and contributors have achieved something that many professionals have struggled to do for a long time now, and this is separating out mental illness and mental health. There is a need for honest but sensitive conversations around what we would term mental health and well-being, the need to acknowledge normal reactions to difficult situations, and as the show's highlighted, find ways to process and manage these feelings and emotions. OK, says Scott, that's deep enough for now, but thank you for addressing a difficult subject with honesty and creating a sensitive and safe community for people to share their genuine difficulties that life throws in our direction. And Scott, it's something that we'll continue to do. It's a really important part of this show, as you've identified. So some time ago, we connected, and you mentioned, Neil, my Left Behind project, which was just a seedling at the time. Well, it's growing slowly, and I've a selection of images to arrange on my website when I eventually do get around to it. Left Behind, by the way, is exactly how it sounds. The stuff of life that we find along our treks, trails, adventures. I often find gloves on gateposts out on my walk. I could have made a pictorial, if not physical, collection of these things. And the odd thing is, they always seem to be the left glove. Never the right, just the left. Anyway, says Scott, I shared some street photography with the Extra Mile group on a recent Zoom session. Yes, you did, and thank you for that. And that's my main interest. I got a bit excited that both street and the Left Behind project actually came together in one at the weekend. Now, I have to admit, says Scott, I am a bit of an oddity in Scotland, that I really have no interest in the beautiful game that's called football. Tonight, if you're listening to this on the day of release, the Euros start, the football Euros, and Scotland are they the first? Yes, they are. It's the first match because they're playing the hosts, Germany. But Scott, you might not know about that. I suspect you probably will. There's a few flags flying where you are. However, this story is about football, and more to the point, says Scott, a scarf, a football scarf. Now, I took a street photo of a boy going to a match in his red and white Aberdeen hat and scarf back in November last year. Anyway, at the weekend, just gone, my eye was drawn to a second red and white scarf, this time due to the left behind nature. It was tied to a hand grab pull in a shop doorway, the contrast of harsh and very heavy chains securing the empty shop and the soft, light nature of the red scarf, the red and white scarf tied to the grab pull. With that in mind, having taken the picture of the boy just a couple of streets away last year, I wondered, is it possible it could just be the same scarf in my new picture? My imagination went on a bit of an adventure, Neil. Long after the images were taken, did his team disappoint him, resulting in the discarding of said scarf in protest? Did something happen that caused it to fall, running for the train with no time to get back? Was it a present with perhaps sentimental value? Going back to the images, it was clear the scarf was not really a match, no pun intended, but it shows the beauty of this pastime we undertake, the ability, that is, in photography to create images, and also the narrative that we like around them. Even though my narrative was perhaps proven wrong, I really did enjoy the journey. Scott, I do think that is you're right, that's the wonder of photography, that our imaginations are allowed to play with the pictures that we make, and we can create whole new narratives to go with our pictures. I think that's the wonder of it. Your picture's on the show page today, along with a link on the show page to your wonderful street work. It really is. I look forward to far more from the Left Behind project. Keep your eyes peeled as well, Scott, for gloves. I'm telling you, it's only the left glove you'll find. Tell me it's true, as you're doing your Left Behind project. Right, to this week's guest. A while ago, I had a guest on the show who just prior to the interview started by telling me that there were 3 areas I couldn't mention, which was a bit of a surprise. And actually, those 3 areas, or was it 4 actually? Anyway, they formed about half of the important questions that I had. Now, I spent quite a lot of time researching my guests, watching films, reading stuff, going on to various social media channels. So scratching out some questions that are pivotal to their story was a bit tricky. And then they said, if you call me an photographer, I will simply put the phone down. And that was pretty much the rest of the interview that I planned. So needless to say, it was a tricky moment, but we got through it, and you did hear that conversation. Now, this conversation wasn't like that at all, but when Tim Clinch, renowned for his sublime food storytelling pictures, said, "I am not a food photographer," I was worried for a moment that I was going to need to talk about his fabulous career without mentioning food once. But I needn't have worried. What we have, I think, is a conversation today peppered, can you see what I did there? With reflections, another possible pun, about life behind a lens that's flavoured with reality and candour. And really, there's 3 puns in a row. I should honestly be writing scripts for local television news. But I like Tim. I like Tim a lot because he's the kind of photographer I'd really love to sit down with on one side of a hillside on a summer's day, staring across the valley and putting the world to rights with what I would call a classic and another thing conversation. So here is a chat about food that's not about food. And let me tell you this, Tim Clinch is not a food photographer.
Tim, I have very little experience of Bulgaria, save for getting entirely lost with the family trying to drive through Sofia a good few years back. It's a city that lets you in but doesn't seem to let you out. But I'm intrigued about Bulgaria, and because that's where you live now, and how you ended up there.
It's normally a 2-bottle of wine story, this one.
Well, feel free if you. I mean, it's a different time in Bulgaria to where I am now. I mean, it's gone past the yardarm. You can actually, if you want.
It is. I'm 2 hours ahead of you. You see,
yeah, I know.
So to cut a very long story short, horrible. I lived in France. Bad divorce. Lost everything. Oh God, life was a nightmare. And I met a wonderful woman who's now my best mate and everything, and which is great. And we were driving back to England, and I'd said to her fairly early on in our relationship, I haven't got any money left. Right. And she was like, "Oh, so you're never going to lose your money or your looks then, are you?" Oh, thank you. And I remember we were driving back on some motorway in north of France, the rain going sideways. And I remember overtaking a coach that said it came from a place called Plovdiv. And I said to Marigold, "Where's Plovdiv?" And she said, "Oh, it's in Bulgaria. I've just seen this program about it. Apparently it's got the cheapest houses in Europe." So I sort of very grumpily said, "Oh, I suppose I better buy bloody house there then." So we came back to Bulgaria and I bought my house and it cost 12 grand.
In Plovdiv?
No, not in Plovdiv. No. But my house cost substantially less than a second-hand Volvo. So if I'm perfectly honest, it was the price of houses that brought me here. I never thought I would end up living here, but I knew that if I left the pathetically small amount of money I had left after my divorce in my bank account, it would last a matter of weeks. and I suspect so did she. And that was 19 years ago now. And I've been living here now full time for 10 years, and I've fallen in love with it, and it's a fantastic place.
Are you fully? What's the word?
Am I fully legal? Yes.
Well, no, that wasn't the phrase I was going to use. I was going to ask: Are you part of the community? Have you joined the local drama society or something?
Yeah, I live in a little village in the middle of nowhere near the ancient capital of Veliko Turnavo, and it's fabulous. And I've just had a guy come out here, and he said, "Never seen wildlife or insect life or anything like it." You know, we sat there one evening looking at 3 different kinds of woodpecker who live in my walnut tree, watching fireflies going around and a couple of lizards, and you think, something like this.
This is all right, isn't it? I mean, I've seen pictures of your house on your Instagram
Thank you.
grid, and it does look reasonably idyllic.
It's gorgeous, yeah. It is. I mean, it's lovely. Also, I suppose at the stage that I am in my career, I'm 70 next year, so I'm quite old, and it obviously hasn't happened to you yet. But when it does happen, it's a hell of a shock.
The reaching 70 bit, do you mean?
Yeah.
Well, I do remember, Tim, years and years ago, trying to work out how old I would be, because I think we go by the date on our driving license, and I believe that runs out when I'm 70 or something. And I remember working out what year it would be, thinking, wow, it's a long way to go till then. And it's getting just a little bit closer than I'd like it to be.
I mean, it's weird, and I think it's weird. I think the weirdest thing, as well, is I feel in my life, in my relationships with bits hurt. You know, I've got a dodgy knee at the moment because whatever. Yeah. But in terms of my relationships with my friends, I feel exactly the same. I mean, my best mate, John Mason, who's another photographer, we've known each other for 45 years, and it's exactly the same. My relationship with John is unchanged from the day we first met. You know, obviously bits of us are slowing down, and, you know, I'm deaf in one ear and I've got 2 metal hips, but it's wow, really?
But you're both as daft as you ever were, in other words.
Oh, nothing's different at all. No. I mean, you were talking earlier about mental health, and nothing's changed now.
No.
Nothing at all. No. As I say, and people that I've known since, for a long time, they're just exactly the same. I mean, I did get offered a seat on a bus the other day, which was faintly depressing.
Oh, right. Were you suitably offended and belligerent with that? I would have been.
I don't know. I was so shocked I didn't really know what to do. This lovely lady said, would you like to sit down?
Well, I mean, I've got a few years to catch up to your maturity, and I prefer to call it maturity rather than age. But I do remember being I've told this story before, so I apologise if I'm boring listeners, but I do remember being at Reading Station, looking mildly confused by one of the new ticket machines. And a young lady came up to me and rested her hand on my shoulder and said, "Do you need some help?" And I haven't forgotten that moment.
It's a weird one. It doesn't matter. I suppose my stepson said to me a while ago when he was over here, I was in the kitchen cooking, playing some music, and he came down and he said, "Was any of the music that you ever listened to recorded this century?" And I thought, no.
Probably not. No.
I don't think any of it was.
I want to take a big bite, full pun intended, into food photography, although I'm being careful about that now, because just before we pressed the red button and this whole thing started, Tim was very quick to say to me, "I'm not a food photographer." And that's something I want to talk about, actually, because if you look at your website, you'd believe that you that was your label. But it's important that we address that. But I want to start with travel, actually. From the outside, you have the job most photographers would love. Oman, Spain, more to France, Spain.
Yeah,
more Spain,
I do.
More France.
I'm very lucky, and I absolutely never ever lose sight of that. I've been an awful lot of places, you know.
No.
And if, touch wood, I don't, but if I were to drop dead overnight, I've had a great time. And I have travelled and I've been places that I could have previously, have only dreamed of. Without photography, I wouldn't have gone to...
It's a passport, isn't it? It's a passport to curiosity and the world.
Yeah.
I mean, I think next to that actual paper book that you carry with you, photography is probably the most important passport of the lot, for me anyway.
I think it is, definitely. I mean, when I went to art school in the 70s, I studied typography.
Yeah.
And I'm still mildly obsessed with typography. I mean, I realised fairly early on, because photography was a passion. The photography tutor at Worthing Art School hated me.
Oh.
And he did actually memorably say to me, because I was studying typography, but I was always hanging around the darkroom and trying to get in the studio and stuff like that. And he did once memorably say to me, he said, "Tim, the nearest you'll ever get to being a bloody photographer is being a stop-go board operator at roadworks." And I thought, oh dear, doesn't bode well. But anyway, I did manage to shut him up. But I think I realised fairly early on, I mean, one of the things that made me want to be a photographer was National Geographic magazine.
Yeah, I would imagine that started a lot of love affairs with photography.
I think it did. And I remember saying to my dad, who does this? Who does these pictures? Well, photographers do it.
Yeah.
And I realised fairly early on that if I was to be a typographer, I would sit in a basement in Holborn for the rest of my career. With artificial lights on, designing type, which would have been all right, but and then I suddenly realised that if I became a photographer, I could go around the world. I assisted for a long time, and I think it's a very important thing to say. I've started this thing, I'm sure you've seen it, called Two Photographers.
I have, yeah. We're going to talk about it, yeah.
Which I started with my friend Joanna. When the pandemic hit, I'd known Joanna for a while. We shared the same, am I allowed to say, utterly useless agent for a while? But anyway.
As long as you don't mention him or her.
I won't mention her name.
I'll have to blank out the gender reference there.
Sorry, his or her name, yeah. But anyway, we share the same agent. Yeah. And, when the pandemic hit, as two photographers who basically relied on going on location to earn a living, we sort of were talking. We said, what on earth are we going to do? And so I think I said, well, we'll do something online, I suppose. I don't know, And Joanna said, do you know how to? And I said, no, I've got absolutely no idea at all, And so we held our noses and jumped in the deep end, and it's 4 years later, it's going really well. So that's, and I thoroughly enjoy it, which is something that I didn't think I would. So
because that involves, as you say, it's digital work. You're not pressing the flesh of the people that you're necessarily mentoring, are you? But you've not found that to be a disadvantage.
No, absolutely not at all. I mean, we run workshops as well, so a lot of people who are in the group come and workshop. Yeah. But no, I don't. I mean, and also, you discussed travelling earlier, and travelling is wonderful. I mean, absolutely wonderful. And as I say, I've enjoyed 95% of what I do throughout my life and career, and I do realise how incredibly lucky I am. But it got to the point where, oh God, do it really? Do it another airport, another flight, I suppose the only difference about getting older, or what did you call it? About maturity.
More mature. I prefer maturity.
Yeah. Is I just slow down a bit.
Or level, actually, Tim. I've heard it described as level. You're not age 70, you're level 70.
Oh, am I? Oh,
which I suppose in gaming terms would mean you're a master.
I don't know about that. But anyway, it just meant I slowed down, and the thought of getting all that kit together and winding all the cables up and packing another bag and getting on another flight and going somewhere. I did a really big job. The last really big job I did was about 3 years ago, I guess now, and it was in a place called Montenegro, and my client was 28. I'm sorry to pull rank here, but he didn't know what he was talking about. He said, right, I want you to do that. And I'd have to say, well, I can't do that. And he said, no, you don't understand, Tim. I want you to do that. I said, well, I can't do that. Why not? And I'd go, okay. But he never thought to say, so how can we solve this problem? And that, to me, one of the joys of photography all my life has been solving problems. I love it.
Yeah, do you know, this is a constant theme with photographers I talk to. I've even had some say, I'm not so much a photographer, but a problem solver. It's interesting that you should use that expression, because I think a lot of photography is about solving problems, whether that be light, composition, people, because people skills is a huge part of it, is problem solving. Yeah. A lot of it is negotiation, actually, isn't it, really?
Absolutely. And to me, it's the big buzz. I write a column in a magazine called Black and White Photography.
Yeah.
And the column is called A Fortnight at F8. And the title of that came from, I used to work with a wonderful photographer, a wonderful guy called Andrew Shaler, who's a brilliant photographer, by the way, absolutely wonderful photographer. And he assisted me for a long time. And we'd have this, I suspect, slightly macho sort of thing. We'd turn up somewhere. We wouldn't get the exposure meter out of the case. We'd sort of guess and do a Polaroid. And, we'd go, oh, well, I reckon that's a 15th at f16. It's like, no, that's a 30th at f11. And I remember going away with Andy, and we turned up in some ball bearing factory somewhere in God knows where, and it was black. And I just turned to Andy and said, so what do you reckon the exposure in here is? He went, I don't know, fortnight at f8, I reckon. So that's why it's called that.
Robert Frezon was an inspirational photographer for you when it came to food. Somebody I wasn't entirely au fait with, much to my shame, having now looked at his work. He worked under the guidance of Irving Penn for 13 years, so it's not a bad way to start as a photographer.
I'm going to interrupt you there and say I assisted him.
Did you?
4 or 5 times.
Right.
When he came over to UK. He's one of my absolute heroes.
Yeah.
And Bob Frezan, he was the coolest dude ever. He had button-down shirts and penny loafers, and he was just the nicest man. And as you say, he worked for Irving Penn, or as we sometimes call him, God. And I assisted him 2 or 3 times. We did a wonderful shoot at, it was one of my all-time favourite days. We did a shoot at Rules Restaurant, which is the oldest restaurant in London. We photographed, I think it was the sommelier or the head waiter or whatever, who'd worked there all his life. Ever since he was 18, he'd worked at Rules. Anyway, so Bob said, well, Tim, it would be, he kind of spoke a bit like Jimmy Stewart. And he said, well, Tim, it's a shame, I guess it's a shame not to have some lunch as we're here. So he bought me lunch at Rules. And I sat opposite this great man. I mean, the book A Taste of France is literally there.
Yes.
It's the ultimate food photography book for me. And he regaled me with stories of working with Irving Penn, shooting A Taste of France. He was a fabulous photographer, a really lovely man.
And he shot at 35. He shot 35mm film, didn't he? At a time when a lot of people weren't.
He shot A Taste of France was shot on 35mm on Kodachrome.
Yeah.
In those days, nobody shot on 35mm.
No. Well, Bailey was.
Well, yeah, but I mean, I'm talking about real photographers, not fashion photographers.
Oh, stop it!
But nobody shot on 35mm, especially not food, and especially not food that was cooked by real people and served up on slightly chipped enamel plates in the back of somebody's farmhouse in France.
Yeah.
It was unheard of. Absolutely. That book broke all the molds of food photography. And it's still as fresh as it was the day that he shot it, and as influential.
Well, he would photograph food in a messy way then, wouldn't he? Really?
Yeah, very much so.
There was another photographer that was very influential as you were building your career, and that was Rolf Gobbitz. What did you learn under this extremely talented international photographer?
I'm a firm believer in unlearning stuff.
Unlearning stuff?
Yeah. You have to learn it.
And then unlearn it.
And then to free yourself up, you have to unlearn it,
Yeah.
And I remember the first day that I went to work for Rolf, who's a masterful photographer. I mean, he shot everything on 5.4, and I shot on 5.4 for most of my career. And I remember first day with Rolf, we had to go and photograph a man called Sir Keith Joseph, who was a member of Thatcher's cabinet, and he was the education man, I think, anyway. And we had to photograph him in the Hotel Meurice in Paris. And so we went over there, and I sort of met Rolf and thought, and I said, well, where's your kit? Because as a photographer, I used to hump a load of kit around, and he said, oh, it's just there. And there was like 2 cases, 5.4, some film. And I thought, where's the lights? He said, I won't be taking any light. So I remember we got to the Hotel Meurice and set this thing up. And so Rolf said, go and sit over there and I'll do a Polaroid of you. And then he said, sit still. It's an 1/8 of a second at f5.6. And my whole body, it was like an electric shock had gone through my body. you can't shoot a portrait an eighth of a second. You can't use f5.6 on what on earth are you doing? Anyway, he did a Polaroid, and I just remember to this day him peeling the Polaroid apart, and it was just
exquisite,
beautiful.
Yeah. So you were unlearning from a very early time, really.
And he made me forget everything I learned. I'm very glad I learned it, because it comes in extremely handy, because when it comes to solving problems or getting yourself out of a corner, it's all there. But unlearning and learning how to take those risks. I mean, there's a fabulous interview with Orson Welles about when he shot what's the
Citizen Kane?
Yeah. And basically it was him, a lighting cameraman who was an alcoholic, and a scriptwriter who was a failure. And they got together and made this film, and they were given complete free rein. And they said to him, what gave you the confidence to make what is arguably the greatest movie ever made? And he said, ignorance. He said, it's the best confidence you can have.
Yeah.
He said nobody had told me I couldn't do it. So I said, well, let's do that then. And that's what unlearning taught me, I think, is just thinking, okay, well, let's do it that way. Blimey.
And Tim Clinch returns shortly for the second part of today's conversation. Now, today's Poetry for the Path is something forwarded to me by a friend of the show, Evie Masters. Hello, Evie. It's actually a very old poem that's been adapted slightly for photographic purpose by James Tippett, who was born 1885, an American educator who wrote a lot of important books and poems and thoughts for children. And Evie chose it because the memories part, and I agree, Evie, could so easily relate to what we do as photographers and the gift we have to offer when we make and take pictures.
At birth, we board a train and meet our parents, and we believe they'll always travel with us. However, at some station, our parents will step off the train, leaving us on our own to continue the journey. As time goes by, other people board the train, and they will be significant in our lives, our siblings, friends, children, and even the love of our life. Many people will step off and leave a void. Others will be so inconspicuous that we hardly realize that they've vacated their seats. Our journey on this train will be filled with joy, sorrow, dreams, hellos and goodbyes. We don't know at which station we ourselves will disembark. So let's live happily, love and forgive. It's important because when it's time for us to step off, we should leave behind beautiful memories for those continuing their journey. Let's be content with what we have and thank the stars for this incredible chance. And thank you for being a passenger on our train.
If you have a poem, something that embraces your love of walking and or photography, or both, send to stories@photowalk.show. Stories@photowalk.show. It's a busy day in the mailbag today. It really is. Next up, Mike Venable with his why. I love to hear your whys. But before I do that, Mike, bear with me. I've not made enough sketchbook pictures today. So let me make one. The language of sketchbook, by the way, while I grab my camera, put your letters and your thoughts on the floor for a second, is an interesting one. Been having this conversation with a friend of the show, Mally Davis, of late, who's been saying you shouldn't call them sketchbook. What's that hooting in the background, pups? Tell them to be quiet. We're having a nice quiet photo walk. I think we're getting closer to the industrial part of where I walk close to I'm in Woodland, close to the airbase today. Right, 125th, F4, ISO 250, here we go. And I'll just change my stance slightly. Changing your stance slightly can make such a lot of difference to your composition. All right, another one. Another sketchbooker. Yeah, we've been having this conversation about sketchbooking as, let's just pick up your letters and stuff, as language. And Mally thinks it does a disservice to my or anybody else's photography when you refer to them as sketchbooks. But I don't know, I'm not convinced. See, it was Marissa Roth that mentioned the idea of calling the pictures that you grab to remember stuff and places where you've been, people that you've met, as sketchbooks. And I do quite like it. I quite like the concept of sketchbooking. I don't think it's as slapdash as, sketchbooking might suggest in the traditional sense of using the word. Are we going this way, are we, pups? Come on then. He's choosing now where we're going. How times change. Anyway, yes, back to your why. Mike Venable. I always like to hear your whys, I really do. Hello, Neil. Greetings from Fort Wayne, Indiana. I wanted to tell you just how much I enjoy your shows each week, and I appreciate the high production values in them. I might have to go and grab my red sofa in a moment to hide behind with all this flattery this week. I especially love the recent show, number 421, with Hans Johnson. Now, pups, I've not been to this bit before. Frankly, it looks like you're just taking me into the industrial section. Can we go the other way? Would you mind? And it says stock grazing, so I'd have to put you on a lead. Don't go underneath the gate. Come on, don't be like that. I know you can reach under the gate. I know that. I know I can't as well. Hearing the two of you talk about the importance, this is Hans Johnson, not me and Barney. Hearing the two of you talk about the importance of music and sound in audio or visual productions, that really hit home to me. Hearing the mention of some public radio programs that my radio station carried, such as Hearts of Space, well, it brought back fond memories of my days in radio broadcasting. Similar to your career, Neil, in audio production, I worked at the local public radio station here in Fort Wayne for 24 years. What a solid grounding. I recorded, edited, and produced radio programs for broadcast. Everything from a local ethnomusicologist sharing his most recent field recordings to local musicians performing at the radio stations to promoting recordings of string quartets and jazz combos at local venues. I was lucky to be in the transition period, says Mike, from hefty 70-pound, 10.5-inch reel-to-reel recorders to much, much smaller, compact digital recording systems. And from a razor blade, grease pencil and splicing tape to a Pro Tools digital editing system. Was that the one in those days called Cool Edit? Because I seem to remember Cool Edit was the first system that I used. I was a bit reticent at first, Mike. I did rather hold on to my splice block like it was my last possession. I found it only recently. I'm very proud of my splice block. It spliced, or helped me splice. I'm just trying to say the word splice as many times as I can, to be honest. Lots and lots of programs. And I think I might have mentioned this, the fateful program that went off the air. I'd spliced together the morning worship show when I was working at BBC Radio Cambridgeshire. I was a production assistant. I don't think I was doing on-air shifts at that time. My job was just to make sure that everything on Sunday morning went out, and it was all taped shows. So I spliced together, I think I did an announcement. I spliced my announcement with the show, and then thought, good, I can pop upstairs to the bathroom and take a newspaper. Too much information, Neil. I appreciate it. Just rewind that bit and splice it out if you would. And it had a speaker in the loo. And as I was powdering my nose, the splice broke. And all I heard was dup, 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 dup for a second, and then nothing. The station just went off air. I ran down. We were 2 floors up. I ran down. It took a while to get into the studio and fix what had gone wrong. I don't know if I ever owned up to it. Not sure the programme organiser. Did he say something? My memory is not serving me on that one this morning. When I retired, says Mike, continuing, several years ago, I rekindled my love for photography. I'd always had a camera in my hand since I was 7 years old, but my photography was pretty much family events and vacations. Since retiring, I've come to a greater understanding as to my why of photography. It's very simple, really. It's a very basic why, I think. I photograph because I find it therapeutic during hard times. It makes me happy. It makes me re-examine the world around me and see things I perhaps didn't notice before. To appreciate the world around me and connect with it, and connect it to everything else around me. My why is really an extension of my radio broadcast days. In my broadcasting career, I was able to use my creativity and produce radio shows for broadcast and then share my creativity with our listening audience through the radio station and the public radio networks. And now I use and share my creativity through photography and the editing process of my photos, and post them or share them in my Instagram account. And just as in my radio days, not everyone is going to like everything I create. But if I'm happy with a project and feel satisfied and fulfilled at the end of the day, then my why has been achieved. Take care, Neil. All the best from Mike Venable. I will leave a link to his Instagrid on the show page, of course. Pups has found this. There's a bench we often sit at. It's Michael Block's bench. I think I've mentioned this one before. A true commoner. He walks these commons daily. There's a little brass plaque here. His dog's by his side. Twice every day I sally forth to see the healthy acres roll, to far horizons west and north, where I in freedom love to stroll. We always stop here for a second, myself and Barnes. Come on then. Do you want a little snack? I can do that. What's all this on your tail? Goodness, look at you. Should we have a snack? Go on then. I'm sticking to the woodland today. I've had my fill of making photo walks in windy conditions over the last month and having to record bits again here and there. The woodland is usually our friend when it comes to rain. Come on, pups. Not rain, wind. Well, and rain, actually. Come to that. It's the Photo Walk Show. You've been wonderfully busy with your cameras for our 2 rolling photo features. The assignment in a moment. First up, we need to do a shutter sync. Let me explain the idea, just in case you haven't heard the last couple of weeks it coming back onto the show. In essence, I just stop and I do a 3-2-1 and we all make a picture together and then we share it to show where we are or were in the world at that moment when I went 3-2-1, click. And it's... Now, like all these things, they start off with a full gusto and sometimes they sort of, after a little while, you think, I've done that now, Neil. Let's do something else. But it seems to be going at a gusto at the moment, if that's such a metric for a rate. So we will continue, and I will put them, the ones that you made a couple of weeks ago when we last did the feature, I'll put those on the show page today. Some fantastic pictures in there, and if you give me little descriptions as well, I have an opportunity to include those too in the way that we've designed the carousel for showing your pictures. It doesn't do links, unfortunately, so you're joining in with this because you like the idea of joining in rather than sharing an Instagram or something, but I can put a few thoughts, a few penned thoughts of yours on there as well. So we'll do that first and then we'll do the assignment. Pups, what's that you've got in your mouth? No. Oh, that's all right. That's okay. I thought it was a vole. I thought, what's a vole doing here? But it's not. It's a piece of bark. That looks nothing like a vole. All right, let's put your letters down. And we'll make a picture. Now, I've got a path. I'm just walking along a path, so I know instantly what I'm doing. I'm not even going to change direction. I'm going very purist with the idea. So grab your camera or your phone. Smartphones are just as relevant as we've heard today in the show. And get ready to make a picture. Here we go. 3. Come on. Other listener as well. Yes, that's you. Right, you've got your phone. Pups has just walked right into shot. Pup, stay where you are. Well, I know. If you're there, aren't you? 3. Oh, he's walked out of shot now. 3, 2, 1. There we go. Barney is looking at me in an expectant fashion now because he knows that sometimes I do countdowns. Do you want one of these? Come on then. Up, onto my leg. I took a picture of him doing that earlier on, which I'll put on the show page. There we go. Good boy. I brought one of your favourites as well. We're not supposed to crunch because I get complaints. There we are. I expect a complaint to come flooding in now, pups. Blame Barney, not me. Right, the assignment this month. It's set by former guest John Dolan, whose wedding pictures and social documentary work often embraces the imperfect.
The photo walk assignment.
I think it's obvious, but I think for people to try to do the imperfect, to make a picture that tells the truth without explaining too much, I think that would be a good assignment.
Imperfect.
There you go.
Make a good title for a book.
Perfect.
So good luck for the assignment this month. We've only got another couple of weeks in the month, then we have a brand new one. I've got a feeling it may well be the one from Tim Clinch. We do have a few that we can call upon now. So we need a winner of the famous Not So Famous Flask for May. The assignment was, as they all are this year, one word, and that one word was flight. And the most popular one we've had, I think, was this one. Is that correct English? Cool, we're going downhill quick with the English this week, or quickly with the English this week, aren't we? But it was very, very popular. So much so that I can't possibly choose a winner. I really can't. So I've left it to Simon Blakesley, who set it. And he has gone for, hang on a moment. Let's see, let's have a drum roll, please. Like a scene from a Mel Brooks movie where an orchestra is hiding in the bushes. So, Simon Blakesley gave me a rundown of his favourites, and he has gone for, stand by, orchestra now, he's gone for David Higton. Cue the orchestra big payoff. Clearly we run out of orchestral budget. All the same, well done, David. Though it was a very, very close run thing between quite a few pictures. Steve Reeves' story about the trip to Dublin was in there too. But David, it is the incredible picture of the bumblebee coming into land. From Simon, he said about David's picture, the image of the bumblebee catches my eye. It has an almost dreamlike quality to it. Over and above the colours, the narrow field of sharpness and technical challenges of capturing this picture, the fact that bumblebees shouldn't really be able to fly from an aerodynamic perspective just adds to the wonder of actually seeing it happen in a frozen moment. We underestimate the vital importance of these little creatures as they quietly buzz about their business of pollinating plants. So there we go, David. Bravo. I did love the picture. I put it on the Instagram grid actually a couple of weeks ago as well. A flask is on the way. I shall send it by a swarm of bumbles. But I do know what you mean. Where's Barney gone? Barnes, come on, this way. Come on, pups, this way. But I do know what you mean about the fact that, well, bumbles even fly at all. They are sort of, they don't look like they should. I know they have a special sort of scoop system, don't they? But it does remind me of a wonderful after-dinner talk by a former air traffic controller called David Gunston, who tried to describe how a helicopter flies. And he said something like, these things defy all known laws of gravity and actually lift off, when really, in fact, they should just screw themselves into the ground. I'll put the link on the show page to David's talk, David Gunston, that is, in the video section. It's audio, this film, but if you like gentle humour about something you never thought could be turned into a very funny after-dinner talk, this will be right up your flight path, I promise you. If you have a spare 49 and a half minutes. I had the cassette, Neil. Cassette, Grandad? What's a cassette? I had David's cassette in my car for many years. I must know this talk absolutely back to front. I'm sure I could just, as it's playing, I probably would, annoyingly, so don't get me to listen to it with you, finish off the gags as we're going along. It's very, very clever. Talking of listening, fasten seatbelts. A little light turbulence to come in some places perhaps, but it is time for the second serving. Oh, these TV introduction scripts, they just write themselves, don't they? I think it comes from my 6-month dalliance of being an on-screen TV announcer at Granada TV in Manchester, in the days when they still had on-screen television announcers between the programmes. Anyway, time for a second serving of my conversation with Tim Clinch.
I feel we should address the elephant in the room, because we were having a chat about genres, and Tim said to me, I'm not a food photographer, and I thought, oh no, look at all my questions about food. And it sort of, it brings, I was listening to Adrian Edmondson talking recently, who's a British actor.
Yeah.
And for those outside the country that aren't aware of Adrian, he's a brilliant actor. And he's an actor. He is an actor, although he's sort of been typecast in these sort of, in many respects, for many years, as this sort of, how would you describe him? I don't want to say goofball anarchist, but that's the sort of parts that he was playing.
Oh, comedian, yeah.
Yeah, comedian. But he's so much more than that. And you were very quick to remind me, actually, that, yeah, you might shoot food, but you're not a food photographer.
Yeah, I think possibly what I should have said instead of saying I'm not food photographer is I'm not only a food photographer.
Yeah.
Because I have got the attention span of a gnat. I get really bored. And I'd hate to do the same thing. That's not why I signed up. So I've done most genres. Food is a very big, important part
of it, yeah.
But it's a part of it. I mean, the thing is, I always say when I do workshops, if people come along and say, I want to be a food photographer, my answer is, you'll never be a better food photographer until you're a better photographer. And there's so much more. You'll never be a better portrait photographer until you're a better photographer. You'll never be a better landscape photographer. If somebody says to me when they come in a workshop, I only like to shoot landscapes, it's like, right, come in here and do some portraits. I don't like doing portraits. Great. That's really good. Because unless we get out, I feel very strongly that unless we get out of our comfort zones, you won't get anywhere.
Well, what's the limit of your comfort zone photographically?
I don't think there is one, really.
I mean, is there a genre you haven't tried where you think that?
I've never shot a wedding and never will.
But why would that? It's a conversation we've had a few times of late.
Because if I screw it up, I can't organise a reshoot.
Isn't that amazing? Well, because as a wedding photographer, which is primarily what I shoot, I've always been made to feel that I'm the lowest of the genre bucket.
No, absolutely. I find the whole idea of doing a wedding utterly terrifying.
Do you?
I have a very good friend, John Armstrong Miller, who's a wedding photographer in France, and he just gave us a little chat in the group, and I couldn't do it. I'd be terrified that I'd screw up somebody's great day. Having said that, I haven't screwed up many shoots over the years. So,
I love the context of how you work with food. You like to show the before and after, which is a part of what you do, isn't it? There's a I mean, it's a very overused J word, but I'm going to use it anyway. There's a journey in your photography.
Yes, I like to think there is. And for me, food is, what's food photography? A fairy cake on a plate, that's food photography, right? Okay, so the ingredients, the flour and the butter and the eggs and all that, is that what the cakes are made of? Yeah, that's food photography, I guess. And the flour comes from wheat, so a wheat field, is that?
Well, it is, isn't it? By extension.
And then the chickens who laid the eggs, is that a food photography? And then the person who made it, holding it, is that food photography? So I think to a certain extent there is. I mean, I think in terms of genres, if we talk about genres, one of the things I love about travel photography, and I've shot for Conde, Nast Traveller and et cetera, very nice, which is great fun. Nobody can tell me what travel photography is.
No.
I mean, the last travel shoot I did, I photographed people, interiors, food, portraits, landscapes, cars,
You've essentially just described, by the way, what a wedding photographer does.
Really?
Really?
I suppose so, yeah. But I do like that spread of sort of, I passionately believe that anybody who thinks they're a half decent photographer should be able to take a decent picture of anything.
So pigeonholing is not part of that exercise, is
Not
it?
for me, no. And people, I think people get very het up about pigeonholing. Oh, but unless I concentrate on one genre, nobody will know what I do.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's interesting that you say, looking at my website, there's a lot of food, there's a lot of interiors, a lot of portraits, there's a lot of different things on it. But yeah, food photography it's still life photography. And for me, still life photography is my favourite genre, really.
You're also not a camera snob.
Not at all.
For instance, you've shot campaigns on smartphones.
I have.
Do you still shoot with your Fujifilm X Pro 2?
X Pro 1.
X Pro 1? Right, okay.
Can't afford an X Pro 2, mate.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I do, very much so.
Yeah, I mean, you're very passionate about shooting with your iPhone. And it's not because somebody said, right, it's for social media. It's because you're actually passionate about using it. And
I am. I shot a book on it, actually, whole book. In Mexico, we went. I was asked by a friend to do a sort of charity gig to go and shoot a cookbook, a food book for basically a sort of refuge for battered women.
Yeah.
And so I said, yeah, and it was run by a lovely young American woman called Sam, who was good friends with my friend. And she said, look, the women might be a bit frightened of you. And I said, well, don't worry, I'm sure it'll be fine. I'll take it, but I'll start working with my little Fujis, so I won't be intimidating.
Yeah.
And so we turned up. The first shoot we did was this old lady holding a big bundle of onions.
Oh, I've seen that one, yeah.
She was terrified of me. I mean, for a start, all of these women were 4'11". And I'm not massive by any means, but I'm 6 foot tall.
Yeah, you're an imposing character in sort of
a big fat beardy bloke with a ponytail, and a red face.
Yeah.
And they looked at me. It's like, oh my God, I speak Spanish, so I could communicate with them. But it was what happened was, once we'd taken this picture of this woman who was seriously ill at ease, I said, I'll take one on my phone. And then as soon as I got my phone out and took a picture, they all gathered around me and wanted to see.
Ah.
So I turned to Kate and said, let's do the whole thing on the iPhone. And we did. We shot the whole book. There's a link to it on my website, and it's really nice. And the great thing about iPhones is if you want them to, they can make you disappear. With an iPhone, if you want to be, you're just a tourist, and that's great. And the quality is good. It's good. I mean, it's not, it's never going to be as good as a top of the range Canon DSLR, but I've had book covers, I've had magazine covers, I've had double page spreads. I mean, nowadays, one of the things that I do, how I earn money is I sell a lot of my pictures to travel desks all over the world, to American magazines, English magazines, and I just don't. I shouldn't say this to your loyal listeners because.
Well, don't worry, we're not going to tell anybody. Don't worry.
I just lie.
Tim, do you want me to edit that out?
No, not at all. I'm quite happy. I'm quite happy for that. No, I don't want you to edit that out.
Right, I tell you what. Then me and the other listener will make an arrangement now. We are not telling anybody that Tim said that.
But it's. I mean, I love it. What I'll do is, if anybody sees a picture of mine, say, "Oh, that's really nice," because I'm really not a camera nerd at all. I don't care.
I know.
Someone says, oh, that's an amazing picture. What was it taken on? It's like, what? You wouldn't say to Picasso, that's nice. What pencil did you use?
That's true.
So what I do is I will always lie. If somebody asks me what that was shot on, I will always lie and say, now that's a very interesting picture. That was shot on my Gandolfi on 5x4 Ilford FP4 film. Pushed to stop and developed in, I don't know, old cider or Rodinol or something, And they'll go, oh, yeah, you can definitely tell. And it was all done on my iPhone, Because if you say you've shot something on an iPhone, people immediately think you don't know what you're doing.
It is an incredible tool.
An unbelievable tool.
And you push it all out of Snapseed or something, don't you?
I use Snapseed to process 95% of it, and then to convert it to a decent size, I put it on my desktop and export it as a TIFF through Lightroom. But yeah, I mean, and as I say, I've had about 3 book covers, about 3 or 4.
And none of the editors know it was shot on an iPhone, except us. I quite like the fact we've all got this secret now.
Yeah, I mean,
too late now. It's been published.
Yeah.
You mentioned typography. and I did want to come back to it. I know you like labels, and you still like typography. And you said that I've heard you say we're hardwired to read things, or we're interested in stuff like that. I know I am. And so that features quite a lot in all your work, whether it's travel, food, or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, certainly on a travel shoot, anything with writing on it looks good. Yeah. Anything. And literally get words, get writing, even if it's in, I mean, I live in Bulgaria and we use the Cyrillic alphabet. Yeah. So even if you don't read the Cyrillic alphabet or the Greek alphabet, or I went to Oman, it's all written in Arabic. It's just, it holds us. Writing on anything holds us. It's a really important tip to my way of thinking for travel photography, that if you've got a label, or if you've got anything with something written on, a box that says, I don't know, peaches or whatever, it'll work.
We've been having quite the debate about portraiture and interaction of late, and encounters, as I've started to think about it now. You're not so into candid. You prefer engagement, don't you? For you, I
don't do candid.
No. Why is that?
Oh God, I'll probably get into trouble. It's just too easy. It's just kind of, you can point a camera at anything, It's like, and I get very bored with. I mean, plus the fact that I became a photographer to meet people primarily. So as a rule, I would always ask. Especially, I mean, I'm a bit obsessed with markets, as you've probably noticed. If you've looked at my...
yeah. You do like a good market.
I love a good market, and it's one of my absolute joys of life.
Well, they're amazing to photograph in markets. I mean, I've photographed markets in Africa, in England,
anywhere,
in France, Spain, wherever, and it's always interesting, isn't it?
Yeah,
there's always something different.
Yeah, and there's two reasons that I ask. First of all, is I think it's polite, because not everybody wants their picture taken. Yeah. And obviously in markets, quite often people are busy. But B, if you ask somebody, hello, can I take your picture? And they say yes, it gives you the best thing in the world, which is time. And by time, I probably mean 5 seconds to say, thank you. In that case, can you just take a pace to the left? Because at the moment, you've got a telegraph pole growing at your head.
Yeah.
And it just gives you... And when I say time, I don't mean minutes, hours, whatever. I mean a matter of seconds. Because I've been doing it a long time now, it just turns on and you look. And the one thing that people don't do, and this goes for every type of genre of photography known to man, is just look at things. So especially in a market, or if I'm shooting produce in a market, I mean, my last Instagram post was a load of mushrooms in my local market.
I saw, yeah.
And I looked at it and there was just one out of place, so I just moved it to the left, And just that, and moving that one mushroom to the left was nicer, and it gave me 5 seconds it took.
How do you deal with rejection when somebody says,
fine, just move on.
Tim, no, thank you,
It doesn't bother me in the slightest, because there'll always be somebody else.
Yeah. Interesting thing is, and this is part of our debate, that many people would love to have that ability, that confidence, but it doesn't come naturally with everybody, does it?
It doesn't very much. Again, I mean, when we do the workshops, we always make a point in Bulgaria, when they come here, of starting. It's market day, right? We're all going to the market, and most people will go, I don't speak Bulgarian, and what am I going to do? And it's great. Just come with me, And it's very difficult to explain just confidence to look before you leap, look at things, make sure. And that goes it just goes for so much for food photography. You're moving things half a centimetre, and it makes all the difference.
Yeah.
And if there's something crossed over, you uncross it or whatever, But it really is details. And that if any of your people out there haven't seen A Taste of France by Robert Frazon,
it's one to see, isn't it?
I absolutely cannot recommend it enough.
Yeah.
And it sums up pretty much everything that I'm talking about, I think, in that it's a book about food, but it's a book about food that is full of portraits, of landscapes, of interiors. It's a complete journey, that book, and it's just, to me, it's perfection.
Working with and for organisations, I mean, you mentioned Conde Nast, that's probably a good place to go. What sort of pressure does that bring? Or being at level 70 or level 50 or level 60 or wherever you've been, I suppose after much experience, there's, you've seen it, you've done it, you've been there, you've journeyed, you've
never seen it all. Never. And to be perfectly honest, the day you think you've seen it all is the day you should pack up. Because it's just wonderful. It's a wonderful place out there, There are terrible cliches. I mean, and I'm as guilty of them as anybody you like. The old gnarled farmer's hands gently holding the
I still love those pictures.
I love them.
Yeah.
It's like, I always relate them to beauty spots, like the Lake District. It's like Lake Windermere. It's lovely. Yeah. Why do so many people go to Lake Windermere? Because it's gorgeous. Yeah. How can any human being honestly put their hand on their heart and say, do you know what? I've done Lake Windermere. I would hate to meet that person.
Well, it comes back to the expression that you love. Jim Richardson, who said, say it with me, to take better pictures, stand in front of
better things.
Yeah, more interesting stuff. Yeah.
Jim Richardson, a great photographer, Jim Richardson. Yeah. But it's absolutely true. If you want to take better pictures, stand in front of more interesting stuff.
And there we go. We got the Lake District.
Yeah, and there's no excuse. What we do as photographers, no matter what genre, no matter what level, no matter how we do it, if it's a job, if it's fun, if it's our hobby, it's wonderful. Yeah. It's wonderful stuff, I mean, if my job is to be a photographer, my hobby is photography without a shadow of a doubt.
It's your job and hobby.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, how lucky am I?
Yeah, yeah, I know. You mentioned it already, 2 photographers. I like this idea of in conversation. You've taken workshopping to a slightly different place where you're happy to talk about it. Not necessarily always teach it, talk about it.
Yeah, I think I hesitate to call it teaching. I don't know what it is. But I just feel I've reached the next level.
Level 70.
And I live in the middle of nowhere, so I'm a bit tired of hustling to try and get work, Yeah. I don't, do I want to do that? Not really, One of the best things about going to the next level as a photographer is I just say no. Oh, Tim, would you like to? No. Hey, Tim, how about if we? No. And then when a client drops what I call the J-bomb, which is just. Oh, Tim, as you're here, could you just, no. Would you mind just, no. How about if we just, no. Sorry. But that's because I've been doing it a long time and I'm a bit long in the tooth and no.
Some people might call it cantankerous.
I would think everybody calls it cantankerous and possibly most people might be right.
Look, level 70, photography has been very good to you.
It hasn't all been.
No, I'm sure
I've done some absolute rubbish.
Yeah, I'm sure there's been moments
to pay the rent, and you have to do that, and blah blah blah. But
with experience, sometimes that veneer can get a bit chipped, as you've suggested. But what keeps you doing it? What's your why?
I absolutely love it. I love. I mean, genuinely, if I'm not working, I'll be out taking pictures. I just love it. I love taking pictures. I love pictures. I don't love cameras. I don't love kit. I don't love all sorts of stuff. I love pictures. I absolutely love pictures. I'm that little boy, that 12-year-old boy, who, when we had to rent, my father was in the Navy and then he became a vicar, which was pretty weird. But anyway, and we were lent a house, and on shelf number 3, all the way round this bloke's study were National Geographic magazines, and I pored over them, and I'm still him.
What a pleasure to talk with Tim, it really was. And my thanks to you, Tim. All links to Tim, his workshops and Insta will be on the show page today. Remember I mentioned right at the start a freak weather event. Well, right at the end, the tippy-tip end of today's show, I want to replay one that happened at the end of my conversation with Tim, as it goes. But that's it for today. If you can't wait until next Friday and you want to walk a little bit further together, then the Extra Mile edition number 93 is waiting for you right now. And I promise you, it wasn't planned this way. But guess who our guest is from those that we've mentioned today? Have a guess. Go on. Fingers on buzzers. No, not Mel Brooks. Mel is still alive, isn't he? I think Mel Brooks, yeah. He'll be in his 90s now. I'd love to talk to Mel Brooks. No, not Mel. David Higton. Far more youthfully exuberant is David, or far more youthful, at least he'd say. Yeah, David Higton, the man behind the Bumblebee picture, although he's going to talk about his wonderful Then and Now, Now and Then project that he's making. And we've talked a bit about projects such as the one he's going to talk about of late. I absolutely know you're going to enjoy my conversation with him as we shoot the breeze together.
On this week's Extra Mile.
You shared my image of a bee. Without an 11 frame per second burst on my camera, I couldn't have taken that.
Oh, it's a beautiful picture. Yeah.
So it's become so much more enabling, and the way it's expanded the ease in which you can create things. My abstract images, I mean, can you imagine how difficult they would be?
Well, you'd have got there, but there would have been an awful lot of expensive trial and error. And actually, you wouldn't have been able to treat the backgrounds in the way that you do.
But there's that. And also, I think, actually, the friendships you can make through photography, and talking about things and learning. And I find it intellectually stimulating to go and see what's going on and see if I can figure out how to do things. There's certain things I just don't have the creative ability to do sort of things, some things, but other things I find quite easy. So it's that mix and match and seeing what different people do.
The Extra Mile is part of our private Patreon channel, supported by a wonderful community that we call Extra Milers each week. And I think one of the nice things about the Extra Mile show that we have on our Patreon channel is you are often the stars. And I think that's really important. It's fantastic to hear your stories and what you've been photographing, and your journey through this wonderful thing that we share, photography. Our PS is to come. But before that, we need a play-out song just to make some final frames to or think about what's been said today. And it's from Lewis Island. It's called My Home. It's just a short number. It's a snack. Oh, Neil, stop with the food references now. Okay.
On the road, I've been away for far too long, but now I'm on my way back home. I hear the west winds calling out my name. They're telling me to head your way, down your road and past your gates. Keep your eyes on the horizon. I was looking to belong when I'd already found my home. Won't be long, I'm there before the setting sun, for you to fall into my arms, the place I call my home. I was looking to belong when I already found my home.
Lewis Island's My Home. Marvellous. Should we make a final sketchbooker? I just seem to have been walking along a path now for about 15, 20 minutes. This is not, a path that I usually take when I come up to the airbase, so it's quite nice. The wonderful thing sometimes is you find paths. You think you know somewhere, but you don't really. Or you don't know it as well as you think you do. Shutter speed 220th f4, ISO 160. Let's make a picture. There we go. A final sketchbooker for the day. Just a few closing thoughts before the PS. My sincere thanks to you if you are or you're just about to become an extra miler. We'll keep building this wonderful community of kindness in the photographic and walking world together. A safe place to share our thoughts about this thing that we do, photographing and walking, and if you know of somebody who might like to walk with us, join our newsletter on the website, and you can forward the goodness of the show onto a friend. It's easy to do through the newsletter, and I'd be very appreciative if you could do that for us. That's what keeps the... What are you looking at? He's definitely... Look at him. It's like a pointer. You're not actually a pointer, you know that. Your breed is not a pointer, pups. No. My thanks to Neil Ford, who looks after IT, Andrea Gilpin, who is across Instagram, and Kelly Mitchell, who looks after our Facebook members. Right, a postscript for the show. It's all about surprise, this one, because in a moment I'd like to play you something Tim sent to me following our chat. This is a quote that's been said so many different ways that I can't attribute it to any one person, but I know it's perfect for photography. It is, and it will certainly suit the moment you're about to hear. It is, expect the unexpected, and you'll never be disappointed. Which plays very well into this moment from Tim Clinch, this week's guest. We were right at the end of the interview, just recording a new assignment that I'll possibly use next month. It's a brilliant one, by the way. I know you'll love it. Anyway, he literally, overused word alert, I know, but literally just said the final word in his sentence when, boomf, the screen went black and he'd gone. And I thought, well, he's a straight talker. Maybe this is the way Tim says goodbye. Before I got a text message about 10 minutes later, he was hit by... he was sat in the midst of an otherwise sun-baked recording. That's how we started our show, because I remember him saying, God, it's so hot, it really is. But then he was hit by, and it came out of nowhere, by a hailstone. And hailstones, he said, as big as, well, you can see, will I put the film on there? I'm not sure. I tell you what, I'll play the audio. He sent me a film. But to the hailstones, I think the sound is just as good. The hailstones were as big as... Well, they look like golf balls, possibly tennis balls. Put it this way, you would not have walked outside. And this is what it sounded like. I'll speak to you next week.
Hailstones, literally the size of snowballs. Look. Oh my God.
The Photo Walk is a Loading Zone production.